if you'd like to turn in your Bibles, this is going to be John. We are in chapter 2, and we're actually going to finish up chapter 2 today. Yay! We are just rolling along. John chapter 2, verse 16, verse 13. And this is what it says. The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went to Jerusalem. And within the temple grounds, he found those who were selling oxen, sheep, and doves, and the money changers seated at their tables. And he made a whip of cords and drove them all out of the temple area with the sheep and the oxen. And he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And to those who were selling the doves, he said, "Take these things away from here. Stop making my Father's house a place of business." His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." The Jews then said to him, "What sign do you show us as your authority for doing these things?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." The Jews then said, "It took 46 years to build this temple, and yet you will raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking about the temple of his body. So when he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scriptures and the word which Jesus had spoken. Bless the word of the Lord. All right. So the first thing that we need to talk about here is, when did this take place?
Right before he was betrayed.
Right before he was betrayed?
Yeah.
So kind of when he was in Jerusalem the last time before he died? Okay? That's the way it is in Matthew and Mark and Luke, right? So he comes into the city on a donkey, on the foal of a donkey, and everyone's placing palm trees down. And what does he do? He goes straight into the temple, causes this huge thing, which is really the main reason why they try and kill him that same weekend. Because they basically messed up. You have to realize how many millions of dollars in our money was being affected by what he did. And when you start messing with people's money, you get some angry people. Okay? Now, but here's the crazy part, is that in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they placed this event at the end of Jesus' ministry. And this is important. It becomes the driving reason that leads faithful servants of the Lord, of the law, to plan and murder the Son of God. This action is really the main cause that gets him crucified, because they didn't have anything. He wasn't that much of a threat, but now he became a huge threat because he was in the most powerful place in the country, and he was causing disruption, and he was healing people, and everyone was following him. So when we get to John, does John place it at the end of his book? No. John places it in the beginning. So what we have to do as theologians is, many theologians will say, well, Jesus cleared the temple twice. He did it early on, and he did it later on. But to me, that just doesn't make sense. I don't think that they would have let him do that twice. Because that would have been like, he only went to the Passover 3 times during his active ministry. And so that would have been, he would have done it, caused a major ruckus, taken a year off, and then he comes in on a donkey, and you think they would have been prepared, like, hey, he's going to do the same thing again. And so no, I don't think that happened. And so we've already talked about this, that John is not writing in a historical account that takes place in chronological order. We remember that, how we talked about that? And so, and this is important because, like I said, before I went to Bible college, I hated the book of John. Like, I thought it needed to be just torn up. I mean, it had some really good, chapter 3 is pretty awesome, right? John 3:16 and stuff like that. But when you get to these differences, like here we have Jesus clearing the temple right in the beginning, and everyone else says it happens right at the end. And so we really need to understand that part so that we don't feel like he's lying to us, that it's a writing style that he's doing. He's picking 7 things to show us about God in different ways. And this is just something that he's picked out and he's put in the front. And everything he's doing in his book is to show the divinity of God, the Son of God, Jesus Christ. So, so remember that it did not happen twice. So in reality, this story that he's putting here actually took place right before the end of his ministry. All right. Now, if you wonder why he did this, there is a prophecy in the Old Testament that basically says he's going to come and do this. And this is found in Malachi chapter 3, 1 through 4. And so we're going to read that. And because, remember, Jesus never did anything that wasn't foretold in the Old Testament. And that's why I personally believe the Old Testament was a love letter that Jesus wrote to himself. And it was written in his handwriting, and he knew it. Wow, this is who I am. This is what I need to do. Right? How did he know he was going to get crucified? Psalms 22 tells about it. And so here again, this prophecy basically tells Jesus that he's going to be coming in and messing up the temple here. And so this is what it says in Malachi chapter 3, 1 through 4. Behold, I am sending my messenger, and he will clear a way before me. And the Lord, whom you are seeking, will suddenly come to his temple. And the messenger of the covenant, in whom you delight, behold, he is coming, says the Lord of armies. But who can endure the day of his coming? And who can stand when he appears? For he is like a refiner's fire, like a launderer's soap. And he will sit as a smelter and purifier of silver. And he will purify the sons of Levi, and refine them like gold and silver, so that they may be present to the Lord as offerings of righteousness. Then the offering of Judah and Jerusalem will be pleasing to the Lord, as in the days of old and in their former years. Now this is important because Malachi was the last straw for God. The Jews had this cycle of disobedience going. God brought them out of Egypt. You remember that? And so they're out of Egypt. They're super happy, and they just saw the ocean split, and they walked across on like, whoa, God is amazing, right? But then, oh, I'm hungry. They start complaining, and then they start doubting God, like, oh man, we'd be better off with the Egyptians. Right? So then God disciplines them, and they're all like, oh, and then he restores them after they ask for forgiveness. And they have continuous miracles. But their disobedience keeps getting worse and worse and worse over time. And every time God does the same thing. There's disobedience, then he punishes them, then they feel sorrow and they ask for forgiveness, then he restores them. And then after a little while, what do? They're disobedient again, and then he punishes them. And then they feel sorry and ask for forgiveness, then he restores them. And there's this loop going on through the whole Old Testament. It's like this big wheel. And when you get to the book of Malachi, it's the end of the journey. Because they're so disobedient that it's reached to the house of the high priest. And the very people that are supposed to be the most holy and love God the most, the sons of Levi, they are doing detestable things in the temple. And really what it was food, a lot of it. And so what the priests were doing, and I can't remember exactly, but during the sacrifice, like they put all this meat and fat into something that's boiling, and the aroma is good. And basically what they could do is they could stick one fork, like straight down or something like that. I don't know exactly what it was, but it was like they stuck down, and whatever came out was their portion that God had given to them, right? And so they did weird things, like maybe they had 2 forks, or they put the fork and then they like shoved it against the side. They were messing stuff up so that they weren't relying on God anymore to put stuff on the fork. They were putting it on in special ways that got more stuff out, or better stuff. And so there was the sons of Levi, they were impure. And so God's final punishment for them was he just left. He's like, my temple's not pure anymore, you're not pure. You're robbing God, and so I'm gone. And he was gone for 400 years. Not a single word. Can you imagine being those last priests where God was like, I'm sorry, you guys are messing up. You're supposed to be holy. I'm gone. And then years go by. And how hard would their faith be? Because they saw God's presence, and now it wasn't there. And 400 years goes by. And so now we get into this New Testament, and during that 400 years, do you think those sons of Levi repented and just became much better in their sacrifices and all these things? No, they didn't. And they got worse. And they developed a whole religious system because God wasn't around anymore. And so they kind of turned it into a business. And so now this prophecy says that, yes, I am going to send the Messiah, and he is going to come suddenly to the temple, and you're not going to like it because he's going to refine you. And who likes to be refined? No, right? Refining is a painful process, right? And so when he came, he was there to refine the sons of Levi, and the sons of Levi were like, we're not going to have it, we're going to kill you. Because they thought, they had expectations that he was going to do these great things, but it was their expectations, it wasn't his expectations. All right. Prophecy fulfilled. God sent the Messiah to purify the sons of Levi. This is because God disciplines those he loves. And we need to remember this. If you have been disciplined by God over this past year, it is because he loves you. Even though it's super painful sometimes, he loves you, and that's why he disciplines you.
Same with parents.
Yeah, just like parents, right? Now, if a parent doesn't discipline their child when they're bad, does that mean that, is that a good example of loving their kids? No, not really. Sure, their kids are happier for the moment, but later in life they struggle in different ways because they weren't parented correctly. All right, we are no different than these in the temple. If the Lord's church is not pure, it is God's job to cleanse his temple and refine his people. We are his temple and his people. And so that's what we need to remember, that we have to realize that these things happen in the Old Testament, these things happen in the New Testament, but sometimes I think we feel we're special because Jesus has already died and forgiven sins. But God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, right? And so if we need to be purified, Christian or not, it's his job when the church gets messed up to come in and shake things up. All right, who's excited about that?
Amen.
I don't really come in, yeah.
All right. I tell you the truth, it has been a long time since anyone has been willing to clean the Christian church. It has become filthy and filled with leaven. Now, there are many healthy churches and good churches out there in many different denominations. But when you look at Christianity at a distance, there is a lot of horrible things going on in what is supposed to be the pure body of Christ. So let's get to the context of what's happening in this scripture here. Here's the backdrop of the Passover. Imagine a little town. There's no high-rise buildings here. There's maybe sometimes they might have one floor with, and everyone kind of partied on the roof. But they didn't really have like 2, 3, 4 stuff. I mean, that was like super expensive to do. And so picture 250,000 people in a relatively small area. Jerusalem isn't that big, the gates and everything that are around it. And they would come to the temple each year, and during a week period, they would sacrifice maybe sometimes around 100,000 animals. Now, can you imagine how many animals you would have to sacrifice every hour to get to 100,000? Or break it down, and how many priests would we have to sacrifice every minute to get to 100,000 in your normal kind of workday week? I mean, it's amazing. If they had 50 places, or if there was just one, I don't even remember. I'd have to research that. But, I mean, there was this constant sacrifice going on. And people, here's the thing. People needed to have perfect animals for these sacrifices. Can you imagine that? If you had a goat, your goat had to be perfect. It had to be like your best goat. And it was hard to keep animals perfect when you had to travel with them. They didn't have any Fords or Dodges back then. Okay? Okay? They didn't have any type of motorized vehicle. And so if you wanted to bring livestock, the livestock either walked along the ground, or you put it in some kind of wheelbase thing and it was pulled. But can you imagine that you had to have a perfect animal, and walking your animal 20 miles with different things, sometimes they just weren't perfect when you got there. Okay? Many brought their animals, or bought their animals inside the temple to bypass the screening process of perfection. And so this is what the people that were 20 miles away they would do. Instead, they would sell animals at their house. They would take that money, they would walk with the money, and then they would go into the temple where the animals were already screened, so they were already kind of clean, and then they would buy one of those animals with the money. Okay? And then another thing that was taking place is people also needed to pay the temple tax. And the temple tax was for people that were over, I think, 17 or 18 years old or something like that, and you had to pay this tax. Okay? The tax was only payable by the authorized temple coin. And so that is why they had money changers, because if you were 20 miles away, you'd sell your ram or your sheep, and you would get some Roman money, and then you would come the 20 miles, get into the temple with your Roman money, but before you could buy your sheep that was pure or pay the temple tax, you would have to exchange that money into holy money of what they used at the temple. Now, isn't that a good system? Now, it wouldn't be bad if the money was just changed the exact same, but we're going to get into that. Okay, so this is kind of, I'm giving you the context of what's happening here during the Passover week. So during the Passover week, the temple had millions of dollars flowing through it. It was a crazy amount of wealth flowing through the temple. All right. Now, more context. And this is stuff that we need to realize when we read this text. Jesus knew what was going on. Jesus was not surprised and taken to anger because of something that just confronted him. Now, in most of the videos that we watch, he walks into the temple area and he has this look of shock on his face, right? And then he gets super angry, like it's unintentional, like it's just this rage that builds up inside of him, okay? But he was not surprised. He had to go to the temple every year for 30 years. He knew exactly what was taking place in the temple. And so we have to realize that he, for one, was not surprised when he went into the temple. In fact, it was probably on his mind for quite some time. Okay? Have you ever been really upset at an injustice that takes place? Okay? Like maybe someone that you know was taken advantage of, and it just really makes you mad because you know the other person and they're not even sorry about it, and it just makes you mad, right? It's an anger that festers. It can turn into bitterness if it's not dealt with. Okay? And so Jesus has this anger inside him. It's a godly anger, and it's the same anger that God uses when he killed thousands of Jews in the Old Testament. Okay, it's a godly wrath. It's justified wrath. And for him, for Jesus, it wasn't something that was happening to someone else. And that's another thing that we have to realize. It was his house. It was personal to him because it directly affected who he was and who he was reflecting, which was God, a holy God. Okay, and so the wrath of Jesus displayed in the temple must be seen as premeditated. Okay? Something that he had been planning on. It was not a reaction. And so that changes some of it. I think some of us just always thought it was a, oh my goodness, No, it was just like, when I get there, they're going to get it.
That's my time.
Yeah.
So you're technically saying you're saying like someone hit you in the face with a dodgeball and you get really mad at all, but then as soon as you get back out, you're just throwing like thousands of dodgeballs at them in the face.
Yeah, that'd be instantaneous, but planning would be waiting until he comes back the next day and whack him in the face when he walks in the door. That's not a reaction. That is a planned, premeditated act. Okay, that's what we're trying to say here.
I don't actually do that.
Okay? Now, we know that this is a premeditated act because in his anger, the state that he was in, he had time to construct a whip out of cord. Okay? If he would have walked in and been totally surprised, and you're like, okay, just give me something. You don't like take time to, it could have taken a day to create this whip. I mean, have you ever, to create a whip, you got to like go to the trees, cut the branches, you know, and get the cords from the trees and kind of bind them together. And I mean, it's a process. You can't just make a whip just quickly, an effective one. Okay? So he takes the time to construct a whip out of cord. And it would have taken some time. And so that's how we know that it wasn't a surprise. He was going there with intent. He knew what he was about to do. Okay? All right, so now we get to the why. We have to understand why he's doing it. Okay? And one of the important things you need to know is that the animals being in the temple area was not a bad thing. Okay? So that's not the reason. It wasn't because there was poop everywhere in the temple area. You would think that would be a reason that maybe God, but he didn't care about that. Okay? He also doesn't care that there's money changers changing money. That is not the reason. And so we have to get those reasons put aside, and so we can understand the real reasons of why Jesus was really angry. All right. Why was Jesus mad? Do we have any thoughts? What do you got?
Because his whole religion that God worked on for many
Okay? So, but in what ways was it changed?
There's very many different ways of cheating.
Cheating? Okay? What do you think?
Not doing what they're supposed to, you know, like you explained earlier that our pod, they did this and then turned to the side. They're supposed to just go straight down and going back up.
Right?
They were
Okay, so
cheating.
they must have been doing something different.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they were actually trying to get the good thing in that, on that.
All right.
Trying to push it to the side to see what they got.
Okay? You got something?
They were turning the place into a business place.
Okay? All right. So let's look at it. The temple tax. Okay, the temple tax was something that you'd pay every year. The money was used to basically, it was for the sons of Levi. To run the temple, to do the things of the temple, to feed all of the Levites. They had to get all their food from things like this. Okay? All right. So, it cost 2 days' wages. Okay? Now, if you're upper middle class and you have different people working for you, 2 days' wages is not that big a deal, honestly. Right? 2 days' wages comes once a year. You're like, okay, I can plan for that. Okay, but if you're living check to check, week to week, and there is no stimulus programs, okay, you either have food or you don't have food. Okay, and so when this time would come, the very poor, they still had to pay their 2 days' wages. And for them, it was a lot. It was hard on them. A lot of people only had enough food in their house for 1 to 2 days. And so when you take 2 days of your wages, you really have to plan. It's a huge hit to poor people. Okay? Now, the sons of Levi were charging an entire extra day's wage to convert the money into holy money. Okay? Now, God had regulations that it was okay for money changers to make a little bit of money. But it was like a small little bit of money because they needed to be able to pay for their house, right? And their bills. But what happens here, when you look at it and you break down all the stuff, is they were supposed to charge this much, but they were actually charging like this much. An entire third day's wage for everybody that was coming in to pay the temple tax that didn't have the holy coin. Okay? Did you have a question?
Well, basically they were overcharging,
Yes.
and he was angry about that. That's what I learned in another Sunday school. They were overcharging. That's what angered Jesus the most.
Yes. So, there's a lot of poor people. He had a heart for the poor, and they were causing undue stress. They were overcharging, and they were supposed to be acting as God's people, doing His business, and they were making profit from it. Does that make sense? Like a good amount of profit. Okay? Then, they had these guys at the gates of the temple, and they were, we'll say, hypersensitive to imperfections, because your animal had to be perfect. Okay, so can you imagine that there's this line of like 500 people with sheep that they're standing with, and they're coming up in line, and there's these guys that are inspecting the sheep. And they were probably turning at least 50% of these sheep and doves away for some type of imperfection that didn't get them into the temple. So then what you would have to do is you would take your sheep. You're not going to be with your sheep for the next week. So you'd probably go to a local dealer that was connected to the temple, and you would sell them your sheep so that you could use that and extra money to go into the temple and then buy one of their sheep, and hopefully it wasn't the sheep that you had sold the day before that had somehow made it perfectly into and bypassed the system and now is inside the temple. Okay? On top of that, they were charging more to sell the animals that were already in the temple. They were creating a monopoly as they had the supply and there was much demand. They were the only place that they could really get it. Some say that they were charging as much as 10 times the price as what you could buy outside the temple. So can you imagine coming with your sheep, it gets denied, you got to sell it. They take it in, some back door, it's in there. You go buy your same sheep for 10 times the amount, and it is pure. It's made it through the temple process. And so this is the horrible side of what the sons of Levi were doing. Okay? So can you see how when the Son of God would come into that he needed to refine the sons of Levi and help them become pure, because they were not pure, and if they aren't pure, they aren't able to serve the living God. They're just serving themselves, is what really is happening. Okay? Why the anger of Jesus? Jesus was angry because the sons of Levi no longer relied on God to be their provision. God has always provided for his priests. He created the whole governmental system for his people to be able to provide for the temple and provide for the priests. But since God was gone for 400 years, they had created this system where they were actually in business. They were making money, and they were the wealthiest thing around. Man, those Levites, they had enough. If you were up in the ranks, you were like a multimillionaire. And the people outside were poor, and you were eating prime rib, a lot of prime rib, right? Because they mastered that fork maneuver. Okay? Yes?
Sounds like our government.
Yeah, right?
There you go.
Uh-huh.
Let's raise the tax. We need a pay raise, so they write a pay raise for themselves. And people are out on the outside saying, well, where's the stimulus?
Yep. I think that happened in Mille Lacs County, where there was a tax that was supposed to go for 2 years. And then they were like, oh, 2 years is up. Let's just have a meeting and continue it.
No, it was supposed to be just for the roads.
For whatever.
Some specific
You know?
roads.
They never
And they
returned.
were all done.
Yeah, didn't get a vote. It was a meeting.
Magic.
Magic.
In the middle of the day.
All right, so number 2, the sons of Levi were using worship to create profit. And this is something we all have to worry about, that worshiping God is something that is special. There shouldn't be limitations on it. It shouldn't be hard. It should be a place of peace where people come in and they can worship the Lord. And the sons of Levi were making it harder for people to do that. Okay? And this is a slap in the face to a living God. It was not what he intended. And he had given all these commands for them to do. And they had basically used part of a command here, part of a command here, and created this wonderful system for themselves. Number 3, the sons of Levi did not have a heart for God. If they had a heart for God, they wouldn't be the rich ones walking around all full and fat. They would rely on God's provision, and he would keep them nice and athletic looking, right? Okay? But they were serving money. And this is important. You can't serve both God and money. And this has affected governments, it's affected churches, it's affected Old Testament, it's affected New Testament, and that's why there's so many verses on money in the Bible. I don't know, there's over 300 in the Bible that talk about money. Money is so enticing. It's what we use to fulfill our wants and desires. And so what has happened here is the temple became a business, and it was done in the name of religion. A business of religion. Now, have you ever felt like the church has ever been a business? or in the past, other churches, different things, run as a business. It's never meant to be that way. You've never meant to feel that way. But it's so easy to do. And that's why compromise leads to reform. Here Jesus Christ came to reform the church, and he does. Because the whole temple system gets thrown upside down when Christianity begins. And all of a sudden, the power isn't with the priests and the money and the sacrifices. The sacrificial system stops dead for the Christians. And where do they meet? Everywhere. They meet in homes. They don't have to go to a temple to worship God. They're worshiping God in their homes. Okay? And so Jesus creates this reformation, and he reforms the sons of Levi. And some of them do reform. In fact, in chapter 3, the whole chapter is with a son of Levi who is beginning to be reformed. And who's that guy?
Nicodemus.
Yeah, Nicodemus. Yep. All right, so compromise leads to reform. When compromise takes place in the church, Jesus brings reform by overthrowing traditions and programs that have turned worship into a business. And this has happened time and time again. We just don't remember all of it, but there's so much church history that this affects. When Jesus comes back, that's one of them. Okay? But there's many. And we're going to just show you two different ones. He has done this time and time again in church history. The first one's the Protestant Reformation. Does anyone know what the Protestant Reformation is? Who's the major figure? Martin Luther. So here's what was happening. You had one Catholic church. There was actually like the Eastern Orthodox, but they weren't very important back then. It was just the Catholic Church. Okay? And the Catholic Church started to get into this business of worship. And they wanted the business to be good. They wanted to make God they wanted you to feel super holy when you walked into a room, like super reverent, like awe-inspired. And so they decided that buildings were once again important to serve the Lord. And what did they do? They started to spend billions of dollars creating superstructures of cathedrals that are still here today, that many of us can go and visit in different areas of the world. There's even one in St. Paul, the St. Paul Cathedral, if you've ever been to there.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful building. We were in there.
Yep.
All stone, super high, glass windows everywhere. But in a religious system, who pays for that?
The government.
No, the government doesn't pay for it.
Our taxes.
The people of the church, Christians, pay for that. And so what they were doing is they wanted to build these big structures all over the place, but people weren't giving enough. And so they went to the people and they were like, oh man, we need to build this building. Can you help us build this building? And they were like, I can give you this. Okay, and there just wasn't this drive because people didn't care about these big buildings. And so the church got really smart. They developed a business plan. Okay, so what they did was they said, you know what? Maybe we can trick people into thinking that we can get them to heaven faster if they pay us money. Okay? And so what happens, they developed the concept of purgatory. Does anyone know what purgatory is? What's purgatory?
A lie.
Isn't it like the
Waiting room.
waiting in between?
The waiting room.
Oh, I thought it was it.
You're not in hell, you're not in heaven. It's kind of like the Matrix, the spawning program. It's just a white blank area. With one couch. Right? Heaven's waiting room, right? And so they created this waiting room by using one scripture in a book that is in their Bible, but not our Bible. And it talked about something, and they grabbed that and they said, there's a waiting room, and we're going to build this theology around this waiting room. We're going to call it purgatory. Okay? And so when you die, the sins that you didn't ask forgiveness for, even the little ones, they put you in there. Okay? And some people are only in there for, a couple days, and then they get to go to heaven. But some people that are really messed up, the ones that were baptized and confirmed and stuff like that, and members of the church, but they committed adultery and they're doing all these crazy things, murder people, they've got like 500 years of purgatory, which is a really long time. Okay? Now, he's your husband, right? He's in purgatory, and we're going to come to you now, and we're going to say, you know what? We've decided that God has come to us, and He's created a system for us that for today, for 1995, okay? Plus shipping and handling, you can take a whole year off of your husband's purgatory. Now, for a deal, we'll bundle 5 years for, for $25, right? And they had this system where you could pay to get your dead relatives that were already dead out of purgatory and into heaven. Woohoo! Now, some people just didn't care. They didn't like their husbands anymore. So then they were like, guess what? Now you can insure your way out of purgatory in case someone doesn't like you. Okay? And you can invest your own money to get yourself out of purgatory much faster. Woohoo! For a special deal. Doesn't that sound sad?
It's so sad. I had a friend who was so dear to me who lost a man that she knew in school, our age. Like, and we just wept for him. It was a tragedy. And her comment, though, was about how they were giving at his funeral to insure his. And I'm like, what? Because I had never experienced that before. And I'm like, Abby, that's not true. And it, like, destroyed our friendship. I would cry and cry for days because I'm like, how can you believe that? That was their hope.
That was their hope.
I just couldn't understand it.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
And that's why I hope everyone here understands that the moment you pass away, any unforgiven sins, you don't get second chances at that. And that's why if there's a bus that hits you, you need to be good with God. That's why the Lord's Prayer every day says, forgive me of my sins. Because that's so important to stay fresh with God and to internalize it. You can say it without meaning it. But God is still faithful that if you really truly ask forgiveness for your sins, that you're blameless. And we can walk this earth blamelessly. Hey, what do you got?
Well, I experienced this at a job that I worked at because my supervisor and I got into a conversation about she had lived with her husband before they got married. They got married, and I said, you still need to repent because you committed that sin. We got married. I said, yeah, but you still need to repent. No, we got married. I don't want to discuss it anymore. I said, okay, fine. You won't discuss it.
Yeah.
But she got very angry with me, and I'm not trying to put the Catholic down, but she was Catholic, and that's what they're told. And where I work at now, her husband was a Catholic for a while, and he said, that's the way the Catholics look at it. You got to do something right when you do something wrong.
That's right. And they balance it out. Yeah. You'll go, let's say, you do something horrible, you go to the priest and confess it, I did something horrible, then he will give you something to do to pay for that. In the Bible, it doesn't work that way. Okay, you don't have to do 7 Hail Marys or whatever it is. You don't have to do this. Okay, that works differently. You do have to do restitution. The Bible talks about restitution because if you cause pain to someone or hurt them in some way, you're supposed to go back and fix that. That's what restitution is. You don't just leave it, be like, I'm forgiven. No, Jesus is going to say that's unfinished. You need to go fix that. Okay. So that's what happened in the Protestant movement, where Martin Luther was like, this is nuts. Okay? He said, you can't do works to go to heaven. I can't pay this, do that, and get to heaven any faster. And so he took all these people out of the Catholic Church, and he reformed that business model and created a whole bunch of other problems that that we can get into later on. Okay, and that's what we have to be careful of. Whenever you come out of a church and reform, a lot of times you run away from something, and that thing that you run out of, you go from one ditch, you go across the road, you go into the other ditch. So you have to be careful of that. But that's what the Protestants did. They came out, they were like, you know what? You don't have to do anything to be saved. Works don't save you. You're saved by grace through faith. Now, that in itself can be a mistake. Okay? But that is what the primary Lutheran doctrine is. And that's why, because people were paying to get to heaven here, and they were like, no, 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 you can't pay to get to heaven. Okay? It doesn't mean great things haven't happened through the Protestant church, but we have to be careful of the ditches that we create for ourselves.
You read like this, and, oh yeah, I finally out of the ditch. Oh no, I'm back in the ditch
Yeah,
again.
right? Yeah. And that's what happened. Over here, there was this ditch of, I don't have to do anything. And what does that lead to in Christianity?
Like 500 years of that.
Okay? Picture this. If you get baptized and you get confirmed and you go to church, you are saved. Doesn't matter what you do. So what does that mean your week looks like?
That's eat much candy.
Whatever you want, right? I believe in Jesus. I'm going to do whatever I want. Okay? And so for 200 years this is going on. Okay? And that created a time of reform because the sons of Levi were creating a business model around that system. So what happened? The holiness movement took place. Okay, the Lutheran Church created a system where eternal life was given by means of tithe, membership, baptism, and confirmation. Okay, if you did those 4 things, you were a good Christian, and it didn't matter what else you did really, unless it was like really bad. Okay? This led Christians to be holy on Sunday, yet live in sin the rest of the week. This has helped to create the hypocrisy that many people in America see when they look at the American church today. Okay? It's hypocrisy. They feel justified doing horrible things that God says do not do, but they feel that they're totally fine. And so a group of pastors were seeing this, that Luther's writings were basically giving everyone a free license to do whatever they wanted because their actions didn't affect their salvation. And so a holy new movement is formed and created a whole new church through reform. Now, they went out of one ditch, right, where you could do anything you wanted, and then they went all the way across and into this ditch of legalism. Okay? And at the peak of their legalism, you couldn't wear a wedding ring, so you had to give your wedding ring to the church. Okay? You couldn't wear red ties. Red ties were bad. Okay? Because that was a business kind of power. No red ties. And there was other things like that. You could not be seen in a movie theater. If you were at a movie theater, you were toast. Okay? Couldn't watch R-rated movies. I mean, and that's a good one. You shouldn't watch R-rated movies. Okay? But it was this. Okay? So they went from, oh, we can do whatever we want, we're saved, all the way across. Whoop, whoop. Now we're like, oh, under lock and key. Okay? And legalism. Everyone who wears a red tie is sinning. Okay? All right. Anyway, so we have to be careful when we reform the church because we sometimes go out of one and into the other, and we have to learn that lesson. But the importance of the reform was important because there are people that, hundreds, millions of people living in these other church systems that believe certain things because the business model that was there in place for them has misled them. Okay? And that's why even here with us today, we have to be careful. We have to test everything. We can't just rely on the model that we make. Okay? We were talking about the model today. No building ownership, right? Well, we got to be careful. That might take us from one ditch and put us in the other ditch. Okay? So maybe we got to be a little flexible on that sometimes. But we have to be able to be reformed. And who does the reforming?
God.
Jesus does the reforming, or God. Okay? It is his job. He is the one doing the reform through the Holy Spirit. Okay? And every time that we reform, that reform is going to need to be reformed because people are going to mess that up. Okay? So,
It's because it's man-made.
that's right. And that's all that was going on here. Jesus knew that the men were doing this and creating that system, and they went in and took care of it. Okay? But I believe that we are once again in a time of great reform. And I want you guys to know that. There are so many people that are walking away from church that haven't gone to church in sometimes up to 5 years, some 10 years. And they're still Christians, and they still believe in God, they still believe in Jesus, but they feel like the church has just failed them, or it's empty, or it's hypocritical. Okay? Many people are leaving the Catholic Church and the Lutheran churches and some of these other churches because of spiritual compromise. And there is something that this Holy Spirit is doing, that He is going to bring them together again in a reform. The world is ripe for reform. All right, so let's talk about this next Reformation. Are you guys excited about this Reformation? I hope you are, because I think some of us are done playing Christianity. We don't want to go into a place, jump through all the hoops, do all the programs and things in fact, a lot of churches, they have their whole year mapped out. Okay, here's the Easter season and the Lent season and Mardi Gras, you can kind of get over here, and Advent and Christmas and Ascension Day, the Magi Day. I mean, our whole year's planned out with all these different things that tell them what they're going to be preaching on. Like today, I should be preaching on Jesus' birth, right? But I'm not. I'm sad.
Shame.
I know. All right. Okay. So the next.
Say, that's how I know that we're in the right place. Like when you actually posted that, I was like, yeah, because what the other churches are all doing is what we walked away from. So when you spoke up and said that, just kind of a thank you, because that was another confirmation for me. Like you're doing things different. That's where we want to be.
Well, good. And I appreciate that, because Christina sometimes like, oh, you know that.
No, but what happened was I had a conversation with my mom, who isn't even necessarily supporting us or whatever, and she was like, oh, are you guys gonna have a Christmas service? And so then this thought of Christmas, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm a very traditional person anyway, and so the thought of it, I was like, oh, it is Christmas. He should preach on it. So I said something, and I was like, you should blah, and then he walked away. I don't know, there was a whatever.
Enjoy.
And then, right, and then then I was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I just did that. Like, this is the whole, like, God has us doing this. So I'm like, look, I did it, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
3 minutes, I'm like, I'm so sorry I just did that to you, because it's just this tradition and this conversation I had with my mom, who's not even in the sphere of things that we're doing. And anyway, it was,
It's hard to break free from that. It's tradition, and it's other people's expectations, and how much
Right.
what we do all the time.
And there's a peer pressure about that.
right.
Like, we have to be doing this right now. What were you going to say?
I was like, even communion, like at old church we went to, I wasn't like confirmed into the church or whatever, so I was like, can I take it? So it was like, just like, what do you do, you know?
Yeah.
So I felt like I couldn't take it because I wasn't confirmed.
Yep. And that's what, it's communion is a means of control. And so there's many churches where they control it, and you have to earn it, do different things to stay in their good graces to do that. And it's meant to be a free gift of grace that's open to anyone. Like for me, I don't care what denomination you are from. We're not creating a new denomination. We're under the fellowship of God. And so we're not going to put a title on it. If we plant a church in Foley, or we plant a church, have a strong one going in Bach and Ogilvy, it's going to be the fellowship in Ogilvy and the fellowship in Bach. And we're not going to come up with creative, fun names that map out the DNA and the business plan of what we want to accomplish. No, there's one fellowship in God. And that's it. We don't need fancy billboards. We don't need that. Because that's not what God wants. And He is our provision. If He wants our church to grow, who's going to stop that? Right? You can't mess that up. If God wants your church to grow, and you're preaching the word and truth, I mean, He could bring someone from Mexico. I just came here today to see what was going on. That's not because of a billboard, that's because the Holy Spirit led him here.
Yep.
You know, just like the Holy Spirit, I posted something on the homeschool page. I added homeschool. I was like, I'm gonna just post something, and boom, she was there the same day and saw something. All right, so let's continue here. So here's the next Reformation. Christianity is not a lukewarm hobby. Okay, the gift of Christ is no longer the priority in many of our lives. And we have to realize that. Even here in this church, we have to realize that Christ may not be the ultimate priority in our lives. And that's because of the way, the peer pressures of this world, the way the church has raised us. Maybe he's second, maybe he's fourth. Okay? How do we know if he's the priority of our life? I can show you. Okay? If you want, you can take out your checkbook, okay, and look at the way that you spent your money in the past year. Okay? And by your checkbook, money, that's why he talks about money so much in the Bible. And I'm not talking about giving to church and stuff. I'm just talking about look at your checkbook, look at your spending, and you will see where you spend your time, your energy, and your money. And when you look at that, if you can say, Christ is the number one priority in my life because of how I can see that in my spending, then you're great. Most of us, when we look at our spending, we go, is that person even Christian? Okay? And that's because the world is a very enticing place. Okay? But Christianity is not a lukewarm hobby. God wants to cultivate people that are fully sold out, fully dedicated, where He is it. And our time in this life is meant to get closer to God. Okay? There's millennials and young people right now who have left the faith completely because they want to be sold out to something, and when they look at the church is not sold out to anything. And they want to have purpose and meaning and drive. And so they're finding that in different things. And that is very sad. All right, number 2. Worship is not meant to entertain us. Amen? Amen. It's an amen, but I mean, can't we have fun too? Right? And it's not about having fun. You can have fun in church. But when you build your worship experience and build your teen group and build all of your ministries around entertainment, entertainment really becomes the god and the idol that that group of people is there for. I don't know if I've shared this story before, but there was a pastor who was always trying to be on the cutting edge of entertainment for his church to continually bring in all the people from his community. And this church was running in the thousands. And every week he would do something different. Sometimes he'd bring in live horses and have an illustration with that. Okay? And so he always announced what he was going to be doing sometimes. And so the announcement came out and he said, I am about to shoot myself out of a cannon this week.
What?
Okay? At church. Okay? And so many more people came, right? All these people coming to see him being shot out of the cannon. And it doesn't even matter what he preached on because no one remembers that. Right? But everyone was there, and he shot himself out of a cannon, and it was amazing. But that's not the end of the story.
There's more to that.
Those people didn't come back the next week. And he was scared. He said after that service, he went back, and this is what he said. He said, I just shot myself out of a cannon to get people to come to church. I don't know how I can top that next week. I mean, isn't that sad? Okay, we can't build holiness, worship of a holy God, around entertainment. We can't build it around super high quality musical performances. Okay? We can't build it around orations of public speaking that are just amazing, where the speaker's just like, whoo, he looks good, he talks good, I'm super entertained. You know, we can't build worship around that, because then the speaker becomes the idol, and you go there for the speaker. And there's churches that instead of empowering people to be pastors, do you know what they do? They send these guys to other buildings, set up a TV in their church with a camera that puts that main pastor onto their screen in a totally different city. Because this guy is the idol. Now, man, you get in trouble for that, talking in Christian circles, because these guys are the bomb. No, they're becoming idols. Okay? Do you think Joel Osteen, with his jets and his mansions, do you think he's really a servant of God? No. That's not what a servant of God looks like. Servant of God, you don't even know their names, because they're serving for hours. They're not getting paid. They're probably a part-time ministry worker somewhere. And it's hard. Ministry's hard. That guy is a servant of God. All right? So, but worship is not meant to entertain us. Okay? The unrealized goal of many large churches is to attract as many sinners as they can, keep them in the pews as long as possible, and find ways to motivate those people to give them money. Okay? And you have to realize that this is true. I've also said this before, that I have sat in lunches where they would pay for our lunch, and they would put anyone that was thinking about planning a church, which I was planning a church, and so I would go to these meetings. And they would have the largest churches represented there, because they were always looking for the new church planners to kind of take them and throw them into their system. And so I would be brought in, and they would feed me these wonderful foods. I forgot what restaurant I was at, but it was a good restaurant. Right? We'd have this big table, and they would be talking back and forth, and these would be the biggest pastors of, I think it was the Baptist conference. And in all their conversations, in everything that they talked about how to get more people in the door, how to stop them from leaving the back door, and how to get more money out of them. That was all the conversation that they talked about. It was a business. And that's what the Baptist church has sadly turned into. There's still some good Baptist churches out there, but the conference has turned into a business system where if you do their system, you're going to pop up a church of 150 people right away and have rock concerts. And that's not the Lord's ministry. And we know that because people are fleeing that now. It was attracting hundreds of thousands of people. But now people are like, I just don't want to go to a rock concert every week. I just don't need that. I want something real, not something that's empty. I don't want something that gives me a high on Sunday morning and then I'm depressed on Monday afternoon. And that's what people are getting. All right, number 3. The church of God is not a business. Right? The business models of this world are meant to minimize risk and maximize profit. When you throw a building into that, you really get into the business model, because the building is you don't want to take big risks when you have a building. Amen? So when it's time to plant a church, are you going to send your 10 best givers with that person that's planting a new church in the town that's next to you? No, you're not. In fact, you'd really be happy if you could somehow not send anyone from your church that's a giver, and you just find some people to go with. Or you send them with, but their tithe still comes here. That's a good plan that works in a lot of churches. Right? For a year. And then we get them back. So you can have them, you can rent our people, and then we get them back. Because it's a business model. If you've never been to a church board meeting, you see a totally different side of church. That's why we don't have a church board here, right? So, there's no church board meeting here. Okay? All right. Okay, so, and then the last one, the reason that we're ready for a revival and a reform is that there's just too much sin and compromise in these church systems. Okay? I would say that for the first time in America, we can probably say that over 50% of the churches in America right now are okay with sexual immorality and do not classify it as a sin anymore. About 50%. Now 10 years ago that was probably only 20%. 10 years before that it was only 2%. So there's this major shift that's happening where sexual immorality is now okay. Are you dating? What's the cool thing to do? Before you get married, you should test out that relationship and live together to see if, when you get angry, that maybe your fights will somehow magically be a wonderful experience. Okay? Or maybe you won't have any hard times. Get together and see if everything's just going to be wonderful. Okay, well, no, that isn't how marriage works, right? In every marriage, you're going to have hard times. You're going to have times where you just totally disagree. And there's going to be days where you just think the other person should just go and fly a kite somewhere. Okay?
That's good works. Good works. Great.
Right? That's marriage.
What about flowing chicken out of a rooftop?
Okay, but now our world says, you know what? Hey, Christians, it's okay. Yeah, live together. Make those mistakes together. And then, if things don't work, then just break it off because you're only dating. And then get together with someone else and try that. And hopefully when you're totally damaged goods after those broken relationships, then your first marriage is going to work out wonderfully. Oh, no, that didn't work either, so get divorced. People are getting divorced 2 and 3 times. Does that help our children? Does that help our children have faith in a living God that we are complete and holy and blameless? No. It ruins families. It hurts families, right? And then we pay for those sins. God can still forgive us, but it makes it harder for our families to come to God. All right. Okay, so application. And I was really wondering if I should go this way, but I'm gonna. My wife might hate me after work. I didn't show her the
Strongly
disagree. Oh yeah. All right. Jesus is bringing reform as he comes with his wrath against cold and lukewarm church, and we have to realize this. Reform is coming. That is one of the reasons that you guys are attending this church. You're looking for something different. You're looking for something real. And I believe that when we start to share about what's happening here, we're going to bring more people because people are looking for what we're doing right here. It may seem like we're small right now, but there are so many people that want a real, authentic faith where we can ask tough questions and we can get real answers. When there's a teenager reading about homosexuality and they feel homosexual urges, and they go to a church, and the church says, don't worry about that, you're covered. They don't know what to believe. They need someone to be able to say, this is what the Lord says. Your urges, you're not special, you're not, damaged, you're okay. We can work through these things, and these are the reasons why these things are happening. It's not the end of the world, and we can work with that, okay? But there's this time of reform coming, okay? Now, Jesus, this is good. Jesus hates the traditions of men. Hates them. Just realize that. If God gives it, it's great. We're obeying him. But if it's a tradition that we've created, he hates it. Okay? They are abominations to his holiness because we're creating instead of letting him create and dictate what happens. And most traditions of men turn worship into a business. And we have to realize that. You can take almost any tradition that man has created and it creates business. It generates income. Okay? Now, here we go.
I love this.
Take Christmas for example. All right. Did Jesus tell us to celebrate his birth each year? He didn't. He gives us lots of commands, but did he tell us to celebrate his birth? He did not. Did he tell us to take communion?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just testing you. Okay, did he tell us to celebrate Easter?
No.
Did he tell us to get baptized?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's things that he tells us to do. There's things that we have created and we do for ourselves. Okay? Now, does the church make money off of the Christmas holiday?
No.
Yeah.
Billions of dollars. And it's even worse in the Catholic Church. Okay? In a normal evangelical type church, you wouldn't see the money as much, but more money is brought in. In fact, you can fill a Christian's life so full that you could get them into the church 2 or 3 times a week for the whole month of December, doing all the programs and stuff. And every time they're there, you can pass the offering plate around. Okay? You can have dinners, you can have programs, you can have cantatas, you can have kids things. What do you got?
Benevolent offering.
Benevolent offerings, okay? And even though they're benevolent, it still brings in money that they can then use to do ministry, okay? Getting Christmas presents for all the kids and the community. I mean, it's a way to generate tons of income in the church. Okay, now here's another thing. If it is such a holy event, why does the world embrace it? You know, one of the things that has irritated me the most this year is a group of singers that I love their sound because I love a cappella singing where different voices create harmony. A wonderful sounding group, but the people in that group have made the decision to boldly be advocates for sexual immorality. And they have done every single Christmas song that's actually like Christian Christmas songs. And this year, they're even getting bold in how they look. And so it's just gross looking. And they're singing holy, holy, holy songs. And it just creates this godly anger in me because I love the sound, but now I don't enjoy listening to them. You know? And so we have to understand, if the world is embracing Christmas, it's not good. Anything that the sinful world is embracing, that means that there must not be that much light in it, really. Okay? Do we feel more peace or more stress during the holidays?
Until you're opening presents.
Right?
Oh, it's so annoying just waiting till your parents say that you can open them. Yeah, like,
Right?
you have to wait. I woke up at like 6 and my mom was up and she said we had to wait until he was up.
Yeah. But isn't that the truth though?
And that was until like 9.
Christmas is advertised as peace and joy. Like how many songs? Peace and joy. But in reality, it's stressful. If you don't have a ton of money, you think getting presents for people in your extended family or your friend, you think that's fun?
They don't get it.
Right? And then if you don't give them a gift, what does that do? Does that make you feel more peaceful and joy? No, then you're like, oh man, they're going to think I'm horrible. Right? Didn't you know that I felt horrible this week because I didn't have time to work on my sermon, be with my family, and write you all a Christmas note and send you something?
That's okay.
And I felt guilty about that because that's the tradition that we come from. Like, I was supposed to do something as a pastor for the people, and I didn't.
Now that you're here, you're giving the word. What
That's
you
right.
want.
And but I could have sacrificed time with my family, playing some board games this week that we were playing to do those things. But then would that have benefited everyone? You know, I don't know. You know, so.
I will say, being home with the family, we kind of talked about this in our prayer group back here, that I felt a lot more peaceful this year. We kind of watched a Christmas Eve type service and whatnot all together. So I felt a lot more peace this year than I have Black Friday shopping and everybody getting crazy. So yeah, a lot more this year, for sure.
Yeah, so we're forced to stay in our homes.
Yeah.
All right. Now this one, cover your ears, children, but is lying to our children about unseen things help them to trust in an unseen God? I'm worried about that myself because as a pastor, as a theologian, I don't want to put any doubt in my children's mind that faith in an unseen God is something that they can believe in no matter what going forward. Amen?
Amen.
So what does that do when I say that something over here has omnipotence and omnipresence, and then over here say, oh, sorry, I lied to you.
That's not
Am I right?
we should not do
But are we not guilty of that? Can you picture a church that's reformed enough where we say, you know what? Let's just stop that. We don't need to be a part of the game. We don't need to follow the ploy. The salvation of my children and my grandchildren are more important than having a little jolly. Amen?
Amen.
All right, number 6. Outside of our own birthdays, which is a totally different deal, is Christmas not the most selfish day of the year? I mean, if we're really being truthful.
I don't understand the question.
And that's okay. Christmas is all about me. Not giving, it's receiving. We can say giving until we're blue in the face, but at the end of the day, it's what have I received. Okay? It's a very selfish day. Do you give gifts to people who don't give gifts back, knowing that they're not going to give gifts back? If you do, that's great. Most people, they don't know what that means. Okay? I give a gift to you. That means you are going to the store and you're getting a gift for me. And we are going to exchange them and be happy until you get me a tie or something, right? Okay? Yes?
Give them a card with $10 in it and go tell them to spend it on themselves.
That's right.
They can get what they want.
Yeah, so I get a card for you for 10, and you get a card for me for 10, and we just hand it to her. People.
What's the point of even handing it over?
I know, right? And that's the whole point, is it's just, Christmas is really just a time where we overspend and become poor stewards of God's gifts to us. Amen? If that's what we're narrowing it down to, we spend extra money on decorations. Yes?
I don't do it anymore.
You don't do it anymore?
No.
Yeah.
I told my family, I'm done. Because I used to go crazy over it. And all I got was, something happened to it, and then instead of saying, oh, it's broke, well, I'll go and get the me. I said, okay, fine, I'm done. This is what this means to you. I'm done, and then my family knows it.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't pressure me anymore, because they know what's going to happen if they do pressure me.
That's right.
I'm going to walk right out the door.
You know that Christmas is expensive? If you get napkins, or you get those 3 to 5 sets of LED lights that you need because your tree got messed up, I mean, you're spending money, like real money, to have a decoration in your house on a tree that's a dead tree that has horrible meaning in the Old Testament. All right, so we continue. All right, we need to let Jesus reform Christmas. Okay, celebrating Christmas is not evil. Okay, and we need to know that. Because we can go from one ditch all the way to the other ditch, and we could say, if you're celebrating Christmas, you are the devil. And we have to be careful not to do that. But we need to reform Christmas, and we need to say there's certain things that we can do to edify Christ and not compromise things like our stewardship. And there's things that we can be honest about. Like, for one, what's Jesus' birthday? Does anyone know when he was born, the day he was born?
The 25th.
I heard September-ish, but I've heard other people claim March, so.
Yeah, it was actually probably in March. Okay? So Jesus was not born on December 25th. It is a day that was picked. Does anyone know why the day was picked?
Isn't it the length of the day? Was there something dark being celebrated, something with the length of the day being?
It's like
So
pagan
it's
solstice.
around
Constantine, there was a
Yes.
pagan holiday on it, and they slept.
Right. See, she knows because I've done a research. Okay, so this is what really happened.
I was thinking that because it was the day that Jesus was put in the BMA.
Jesus was put in the what?
In the manger.
In the manger?
Yeah, in the barn.
Yep. All right, so this is what happened. Christianity was spreading like wildfire, but no one was controlling it. There was tons of people out there, tons of money that was available to someone if they could somehow gather it and control it. And so, an emperor, I think it was an emperor. It was Constantine, I don't know what his title was. But he was the leader of a country. And he created something in his mind, okay? He said it was real, but I think he just made it up. And he basically said that he was walking along on a road like Paul, and all of a sudden this angel shone to him and communicated with him that Christianity was the way to go. Okay? And since he was the president of his country, or the emperor, or whatever his title was, in one day he decreed that now everyone was going to become Christian. Okay? And probably 40% were already Christian. But now he nationalized, the first person to ever nationalize a country, that the decree was everyone was going to be Christian. Now, during that time, there was other religions that were all over that country. And they had churches, they had temples, they had systems that they were working to make money, okay, for their priests. And all of a sudden, in one day, all of those priests had to become Christian. And so picture this. All these priests then went over to the emperor from all these different countries, or the surrounding area, walked up to him, and then he said, "Are you going to be a Christian now?" And they would say, "Yes, I am." And he would say, "You are now the priest of that church down there." And they would go back with their church that they had already built that was an idol, and now it was a Christian church. Okay? And picture that thousands of times, sending all these pastors back that were worshiping paganism, witchcraft, all this divination. They were all now Christian. Now, those pagans had a few holidays that were super awesome parties. Parties that would come around every year, and they would just be super awesome parties. And they were defying the emperor, or Constantine. And they were still throwing their pagan parties, even though they were all supposed to be Christian. And he could not stop it. No matter what he did, the pagan parties just kept on going. Right? One of those pagan parties was right after the winter solstice, which is the shortest day of the year. So what he did is he had a plan with his inner priests, and he said, "You know what we're going to do? We're going to put a Jesus sticker on that celebration." And so that day then became Christ's birth, the day that they celebrated Jesus' birth, and everyone in the country was now able to have their pagan party, but it was no longer a pagan party, it was a Christian party. And they got to use the same things of their pagan ways as the Christian ways. One of them is the Yuletime law. It's a very pagan thing. Different things, the dead tree meant different things. And we basically took those things over, put a Jesus sticker on it, and it became a Christianized Christmas birth celebration. And as the Catholic Church formed, then they were able to do a very special mass, because they have masses, we have church services, they have masses, and the mass that was on Christmas was called the Christ Mass. And that's why we get now Christmas. It was a Catholic church service celebrating the party. And now it has become what it is today. And so by knowing the history of Christmas, we can allow Jesus to come in and reform, because it's not a sin to celebrate the Lord's birth. The Lord's birth is in the Scriptures, amen? And by reading the Scriptures, that's not a sin, right? But there's certain things that have created this business system where the sons of Levi have been able to capitalize on this thing called Christmas, that we have to be able to be open to reforming for our children and for people who are looking for an authentic Christianity where they don't want to play Christian, they want to see Jesus and really learn about Him. Amen? All right. Christ is turning tables over. And I already talked about that. Like I said, I was going to be preaching on Christmas, but it was because of peer pressure and tradition. And so I didn't do that. What are we looking for in a church? Are you looking for entertainment? Are you looking for influence? That's where church boards come in and hierarchies. Okay? Are you looking for traditions? Where they've got candles and all these special things that happen, and they have the altar boys that have the little candles that walk out very solemnly and light candles. And then they, there's so many traditions that are there. Is that what you're looking for in worshiping God? Or are you willing to give up all of that in order to truly find Him and sit in His presence and be filled by His Spirit and be sent out to do the work of ministry, which is our act of worship? Because I tell you this, you can't do both. Some people can, because God allows the mistakes that church people make, the leaders, those mistakes are good things still happen through people. And that's why you find many good Catholics, many good Lutherans. There's still many healthy churches that are in both of those categories. Okay, but a lot of people, in fact, there was a church that I was preaching in Mulhall, where the Lutheran church, you walked into it, and it actually just felt dead and cold. It was void of the Spirit. I remember preaching there once because it was a small town, and so we got to switch churches and preach during Lent, right? And we would switch pastors. And they only had me over one time. And I had people crying. And they felt warmth. They felt something that they hadn't felt before. And they never brought me back. But that's just how dead and how cold religion can be. And that's not what we want. We want a life full, a true faith in Christ. Yes?
You are really getting into this. I think you've named like 10 different churches that you've been to.
I have been to some churches. All right, so remember, who has the authority to challenge the sons of Levi on things like Christmas and how we celebrate His birth? Jesus does. Okay? I tell you with all sincerity, in most cases, Christmas does not bring us closer to God. It's advertised that way, but it brings pain, it brings anxiety, it brings pressure, weight. Okay? It is a man-made tradition that uses religion as an excuse to love mostly ourselves. All right? All right, why would I bring this up on Christmas Sunday? It's because I'm called to bring you closer to God even if the truth hurts. Paul teaches us about the fruit that comes as God disciplines us. He writes, "For the moment, all discipline seems to not be pleasant, but painful. Yet to those who have been trained by it, afterward it yields peaceful fruit of righteousness." And that's what we want. When we celebrate Christmas in the years to come, I want us to have peace. I want us to have hope. I don't want us to have anxiety and stress and worry. Amen? All right. And I pray as we grow in Christ together on this journey that we will be a fellowship filled with peace and righteousness rather than the traditions of men. And yes, we have to be careful that as we go from one ditch, that we don't go all the way into the other and we say, nope, that's a tradition, that's not going to happen here. No, we don't get rid of everything, but we have to be willing to reform what the Spirit isn't in anymore and follow where He leads us. And that's an important thing to do. All right, so with that, are there any more questions on what we talked about today? Jesus turning over the tables, premeditated and for a purpose, to reform the sons of Levi.